Hello and welcome to the Ros Savage Project podcast. My name is Ros Savage and today I am in Windsor, England.
And I'm Vic Phillipson and I am in Kristiansand, Norway.
And today we are on week 7 of our course on courage, and we're talking about courage and truth. And when I put this course together last summer, I had no idea just how relevant a topic truth was going to seem by the time we got to, where are we now, March. It does seem to be very much in the news at the moment, doesn't it, Vic?
Truth or news about truth. I'm not sure how much truth there is in the news, but there's a lot of news about truth.
Truth and lack thereof.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
In fact, in my class slides, which you can check out on the blog post, there's a link to my SlideShare presentation. I included the video that the New York Times aired during the Oscars, which is just a very simple little ad.
I didn't see it, but I heard about it. Mm-hmm.
Well, you will see it when you read my blog.
Okay.
But it concludes that, really what it's trying to do is to say that truth is hard. It can be a difficult thing to find, but it is important. And obviously the New York Times is presenting it itself as the arbiter of truth.
Well, they are the newspaper of record.
Indeed. And this, I suppose, is striking back at Trump for everything that he has done to try and undermine the credibility of the media by saying, it's all fake news and the media is out to get him.
He refers to them as the failing New York Times.
I noticed that, similar to the highly overrated actress Meryl Streep, who got a standing ovation for her comments about Trump. So I think it's called the ad hominem defense, attack the messenger.
You didn't see the thing I posted on Facebook?
I did not.
You heard that Trump's, enemy of the people speech that he made about that. And I said that somebody in the U.S. needs to stop talking about enemy of the people, because those of us who live here in Norway can't sleep for the turban whine of the sound of Henrik Ibsen spinning in his grave.
Anyway, Vic, we'd better
I know. We better get back to the truth and courage. What do the two have to do with each other?
Well, I think it can take a lot of courage to tell the truth to other people and to ourselves. So the 3 main sections that I covered in the class on Tuesday were being truthful to others, being truthful to ourselves, and being willing to listen to another person's truth. Because, of course, there's a lot of subjectivity in it. Even something I didn't really talk about in the class, but I was listening to a podcast about the other day, was in science, we tend to think that we arrive at hard facts that are incontrovertible and proved by the scientific method. But scientists change their minds on a pretty frequent basis. Especially when it comes to things like nutrition and about what's good for us. It seems like there's a different news story every week about what we should or shouldn't be eating or drinking, which does start to induce a certain amount of cynicism. But actually, the perspective on the podcast was that it is exactly because scientists are willing to overturn their previous opinions that we should trust science, that they are, unless heavily sponsored by a vested interest, they are generally trying to give us the best information that they have access to. And in fact, we ought to be suspicious of them. If they were steadfastly standing by old truths, we'd probably still believe that the earth is flat and that the sun goes around the earth.
And that's why it's called the scientific method, not the scientific truth. It's a method to arrive at, a framework to arrive at the truth, but it's not scientific truth.
Yes, it's just the best that we know so far, given the measuring instruments that we have available to us at the present time. And in fact, she was saying, yes, the woman on the podcast was saying we should trust it not only because it's the scientific method, but because when most of these findings get put out there, they have been peer reviewed. So there is a certain amount of consensus within the scientific community that agrees that this is the best we know so far. And, if we waited till they were 100% certain, then not very many papers would get published. So to start off the class, I'd found this little quiz in, I think it might have been in Psychology's magazine, that was saying, how truthful are you? It was heavily skewed towards social situations in which we tell white lies. Like to your best friend, no, your bottom doesn't look big in that dress.
No, those pants make you look great.
Yeah. And I think what we decided was that there is maybe a fine line between radical honesty and just plain rudeness, or a fine line between white lies and dishonesty. So it's sort of a spectrum. It's not like this black and white situation of you're telling the truth or you're lying. We probably all tell a significant number of lies a day just to be nice to our friends.
But is that really lying? It's not lying.
I think
consensus building might be a better way to describe it.
I think there are situations where we might be tempted to say things that we probably shouldn't say. So I came up with a list of things like on a scale of 1 to 10, like how bad are these things that we say. So I think gossip or mild slander, especially about someone who isn't in the room, is not very nice. And, there's not really much justification for that. But those white lies designed to reassure or to maintain a friendship when there's not
too much at stake.
Exactly. If it's someone coming to us asking for genuine advice on their career or their choice of boyfriend or girlfriend, then maybe there is more at stake, and maybe we ought to have the courage to express an honest opinion. And of course, there are different ways to express opinions as well.
Oh, of course.
Like saying you're a complete idiot, what are you doing with that guy? Maybe doesn't go over all that well, but something more either fact-based or more gently phrased can actually be very supportive and really holding our friends' best interests in higher regard than our own discomfort in having to express these things.
Mm-hmm. I think they're looking for affirmation or confirmation more than
honesty.
Than honesty, yeah. Yeah, they want their choices confirmed.
But then are we really acting in their service best interest to them?
I don't know. Those are really hard decisions to make, particularly interpersonally. That's very difficult. It really is.
I was talking to somebody last night. The reason I'm back in the UK at the moment is I had a speaking engagement in central London last night for a recruitment consultant called Egon Zender. And I was talking with a woman afterwards, and she's on the board of an organisation, and she was telling me about a time when she could easily just have kept her mouth shut. It was clear to her that the CEO was not serving the company well. And it would have been easy just to be like, well, everyone else seems to think he's a great guy, so I'll just stay quiet. But she felt that she had a moral obligation to speak up and say what she thought and say why she thought it. And I was like, good for you. Because that's, it put her own interests in some risk. It could have been that she found herself in a minority of one, yeah. And that could have jeopardized her standing on the board, especially as a woman, because sadly and wrongly, women are still in a minority on boards, and it could have been quite risky, not only for her, but potentially for the cause of having women on boards. So I was, I praised her for having that courage.
And your students, what do they think? If it comes at personal cost, are they willing to be honest? Was there a gauge or a measure of what it would cost them to be honest, or?
Well, it's quite interesting. I have some staunch Christians in my class, and
some staunch what?
Christians.
Oh, Christians. Okay.
Yeah. And I noticed that one of them had pulled up on her screen the Ten Commandments, the ninth of which is thou shalt not bear false witness. Um, and I was actually quite pleased that I'd done my homework, because when I looked into the ninth commandment, it turns out that it was, in the original context, it was talking about witness in a court of law.
Oh.
It wasn't talking about lying in all situations and everywhere.
I see.
Yeah.
I
Which,
did,
of course, if you're under oath, then there is definitely an obligation to tell the truth.
yeah.
I mean, otherwise you're in contempt of court and could be prosecuted for perjury.
Mm.
But certainly my impression before I researched it was that it was against lying in all contexts.
Mm. I'm sorry, I was kind of nonplussed when you said there were Christians at Yale, particularly staunch Christians. You think of
Really?
Yale as being a fairly liberal, free-thinking place, and not people who would have strong religious convictions. I'm sorry, that just didn't compute somehow.
Well, I would
Particularly
say that
young
they
kids.
are, yeah, I would say they are liberal and Christian, though.
All right.
That- yeah.
Yeah.
Um, they're not creationists, as far as I'm aware. Actually, I
Okay.
almost brought that up as an example of different people having different truths. And, this
Mm.
confirmation bias that we can get into when we really want to believe something because we're told by people that we respect
Hmm.
that it is true. And I think creationism has to be one of the more contentious areas where people cherry pick their facts to support what they've already decided.
Yeah. So she pulls up the ninth commandment and says that thou shalt not lie in any case, or
Well,
that was
actually,
her contention, or
she didn't raise it. It was when we were in the breakout groups where they split into pairs or threes to have a conversation about something, and I go round and sort of eavesdrop or occasionally intrude on their discussion, and I just noticed that she had it on the screen. Um, but even then, it is quite interesting when you think of examples like the family that protected Anne Frank and her family. The Jewish family protected them from the from the Nazis. Um, Presumably, at some point, they had to lie about
who was
who was
there?
in their household.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even if that had been in a court of law, would they have been justified in lying to protect innocent people from an evil regime?
That's an imponderable. I mean, that's not really. That's such an unusual situation. I mean, to consider the entire nation of Denmark lied. There were 7,500 Jews in Denmark. 7,000 of them were smuggled to Sweden.
Mm.
An entire nation just dissembled, but were allowed to. I think that the Danes and the Germans did not want to anger the Danes, so they did not pursue terribly diligently in Denmark.
And I would guess there's sort of safety in numbers there as well,
And,
because
yeah, the Danes presented a unified front. There was no Danish on board party inside the country, unlike Norway, where there was the national oh gosh, what were they called? National Samling. They were that's Quisling's party,
mm,
and they were quite popular here in Norway. 30%, I think, in the final election prior to the war. So they'd pulled pretty highly, and there were a lot of people who were helpers. Yeah, as opposed to Denmark.
mm.
So yeah, there's
That
a
was
difference. But isn't
interesting.
there a difference between resisting and lying? And having the courage to resist and lying, those are two different things, I think. Um,
That's a really interesting question, because you could say, well, it's sort of semantics, because resisting could and probably will involve a lot of misrepresentation. Um, I mean, I think that's totally morally justifiable. And in fact, another link that I'm going to put in the blog post is by Gerald Dworkin, who is a professor of philosophy, and he presents 10 situations in which he personally thinks it would be totally justified to lie, um, in the interests of research or in the interests of political ideals. So it was really interesting that we tend to think that lying is bad, but then when we do the quiz, we find out that most of us do it multiple times a day. And in fact, even when we stop and think about it, we can think of many situations where lying is actually, in quotes, a good thing in service of more important values.
Mm-hmm.
So it is often justifiable, really, by any objective standard, not just in our own minds when we try and justify our shortcomings, but genuinely justifiable.
Yeah, but having the courage of your convictions, or the courage well, I guess resistance and the not telling of the truth to those who might have evil intent are examples of having the courage to resist and not tell the truth.
There was an example in one of the readings about, it was from the classical era, where it wasn't a true story, as far as I know, where the heroic path was seen to be, if interrogated on such a matter, to say, well, I know the truth, but I'm not going to tell you. Was sort of seen as being, I don't want to say a compromise, because under an oppressive regime, you can imagine it still wouldn't go down very well. But it was maintaining honesty and integrity, while also protecting the innocent, which I thought was quite an interesting option, but may, in many situations, not practically save either the person who's saying that or the people that they're seeking to protect.
To protect. And your students, what was their consensus? Did they have a consensus about the courage of your convictions, or saying what needs to be said? Or was that their goal? Was that your goal for them, to arrive at consensus, or to just...
The consensus was that it's a spectrum, that we can't be too binary in our thinking about this. Can I move along?
Yes, of course.
To something else just briefly that we did on that, which was more about expressing one's personal truth, right? Maybe when we've been hurt by someone else's behaviour. So we did a little practice in non-violent communication, and one of my students said, "Wow, I wish I'd known about this earlier." So the idea behind non-violent communication is it's sort of a 4-step formula to express your feelings in a non-confrontational way. Another phrase for it is compassionate communication. So the formula goes, step 1 is you make an observation, like a factual, clean, non-emotionally laden statement of the thing that happened that has pissed you off. The second thing is your feelings about it. But again, it's not you made me feel this, it's I felt this. Yeah. Then step 3 is to express your needs, which is sort of, I would prefer to have felt this way, or I would now prefer to be feeling this better way. And then step 4 is a request, which is asking, not demanding, but asking the other person to do something differently, either to make amends or to avoid that same thing happening in the future or whatever. But it's meant to be a genuine request to which the other person can say yes, no, or make a counter offer. And the intention should be not to be attached to the outcome, that if they say, well, no, I don't feel I could do that, that you don't then sort of launch into you're a horrible, disgusting person, etc. It's meant to, really just a genuine request. So, I've used that myself, and it can feel a bit lumbering, a bit clunky to start off with. But I think it's actually even if you don't stick exactly to the 4 steps, I think it is quite a good way of expressing a hurt or a disappointment in a way that doesn't immediately put the other person into defensive mode.
Yeah, 30 years ago when I was, I did a lot of work around Menninger's in Topeka, which used to be, that was, well, Freud was there in the 30s. Anyway, group therapy stuff. That was one of the things that they emphasized. Speak in I messages, long before there was such a thing called an iMessage, but use I. Yeah. Own what you're
Yeah.
saying. It's not you did this, I feel this way. That's a very, it's not certainly a 4-step thing, which seems a little convoluted to me, but the first step in that is to own what you said. And you can only own it if you say, you're a bad person. That's not the point. The point is, I feel this way.
Yes. Yeah, because ultimately what we're trying to do, the reason that we have a problem with the other person is because we're uncomfortable in some way with the feelings that have been generated by a situation.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, you can shortcut the whole NVC thing by just really talking about it in terms of feelings. But again, saying, I'm feeling this way, I'd rather be feeling that way. How can we bring this about?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of enlisting the other person to help in achieving those better feelings.
Yeah.
Because up to a point, we could take responsibility for our own feelings and try and reframe things and be compassionate for the other person's situation and realize maybe why they've behaved in a certain way. But ultimately, sometimes we do need to ask them to do something differently. I mean, how? I suppose it's a bit different, like in the role of a parent. Is it?
With kids,
Yeah.
you still have to own it. You still have to let them know that it's, you don't blame the kid, you blame the behavior. That's the
Yes.
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel let down because this happened. Not because you did this, but because that happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
I expected that this would happen and that didn't happen, so I feel let down. Not that
Yeah.
you're a bad person because you did it, although that is the implied message. You do have to let them know that you were expecting something. You have to be clear about expectation. I think that's 90% of the problem. If you're not clear about what you expect from the situation or from the person, they get confused and they can only disappoint you if you're not clear.
Yes.
That's why
Yeah.
with students, I spend a lot of time making it clear what I expect.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
then, and almost always, as long as you're clear about what you expect, and if it's not unreasonable, they will come up to what you expect from them.
Yeah. Because especially in that context of students, they generally do want to do what's expected. They want to know where the goalposts are.
Yeah. So that's my experience, just not just with my kids, but I think kids in general. Like, just as long as you're clear about what you want, and you're brave enough to say what you want, because there is a certain element in that, you know, as long as your goals are unclear or you're not as clear as you should be, then you're not disappointed.
Yes.
You have to have
Yeah.
a certain amount of ability to tolerate disappointment and unhappiness and dissatisfaction, and be glad for what you get, and not
Sounds
to.
like a good philosophy.
Well, you have to. Yeah. I have this class of kids I'm working with right now, and they were supposed to do 5-minute presentations last night, and we were supposed to be done at 9 o'clock, and at 9:30, I'm still looking at my watch, going, "Please, God, not one more 12-minute presentation." They overperformed far and above what I had intended them to do.
Well, a lot of adults do that too.
I guess it's hard to
I think
limit to
we've
5 minutes.
all been in that situation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah.
So moving along to being truthful to ourselves. And I find this area quite fascinating because I think there is a lot of self-deception that goes on in the world,
There has to be.
all the way up to the top. So I've got a new little graphic that is a bit too difficult. Oh, maybe I can describe it.
Okay.
I'll give it a go. See if this picture in words makes sense. So picture a circle, And this circle represents all that there is to know, like in the whole universe. And at the top, there's like a little sliver of it that's what we know, like for absolute sure. And actually, the more that you, the more you look at that, the smaller that little sliver becomes. But generally, we know our name, we know what family we come from, we know what country we live in. There are certain things that are not too controversial. Then there's what we know we don't know. Like I know that Mandarin Chinese exists, but I don't know how to speak it or read it or write it. Um, I know a tiny little bit about quantum mechanics, but I know there's a lot I don't know. And, that it's a very long list of what we know we don't know. And then the rest is really what we don't know we don't know.
Okay.
And then above that circle, there is another circle that slightly overlaps with it, which is what we think we know.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of dogma, opinions, hearsay, maybe to some extent religion. Like there's a lot of things that we believe as facts, as self-evident truths that maybe other people wouldn't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And my sort of premise is that when we look back at the bottom circle and what we don't know, sometimes there will be breakthroughs, like there'll be some fact from that realm that comes to our attention. And we can either go, gosh, wow, how fascinating. I had never thought of it that way,
Mm-hmm.
or I never knew that. Or we can go, that doesn't fit with my worldview, so I shall ignore that inconvenient truth, to coin a phrase. And the danger there is that on that sort of interface between what we think we know and what we don't know, we can end up like being a bit scared of what we don't know. So we put a whole load of planks down to make ourselves feel secure and to completely shut off that realm of what we don't know. And we'd rather stick to our dogma. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Did that make any
It
sense
does.
there?
It's not exactly a Venn diagram, but it does. It has a certain element of that. Yeah.
It kind of is. And I think there is courage required there because it can take courage to seriously consider things that don't jibe with our worldview, to be open to those as being possibly true, or certainly more true than what we think we know. And I suppose other people's truth can also come into that realm of, the sort of the breakthrough moments, and having the courage to go, to consider their point of view as being valid. And maybe what we are seeing a lot of in America, maybe to some extent over the Brexit division as well, is people not being willing to contemplate other people's truths as being worthy of respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that when they start to see things that they don't know, that people become brittle. They become very unwilling to. Their worldview isn't flexible enough to include those things. Even when they start to break through the piles of planks they put over that, it scares the
Yeah,
hell out of them. I think it really does. Not just them. I shouldn't include them in my group. Probably me too.
I think we all do it. Absolutely. And often subconsciously as well. So, I'm sure that if I were to read Fox News or watch Fox News, that I would find opinions expressed that would make me defensive or denying or in other ways negative towards this perspective that I don't appreciate for whatever reason. And I'm trying to be more open-minded and flexible about that because that's the only way that we're going to bridge these divides. But it could be really challenging.
Yes, it is. But then there's a difference between being afraid of an opinion and being repulsed by an opinion, isn't there? No, I'm sorry. I mean, I don't mean that in a truly not to be funny. I mean, there's repulsion and there's fear. Now, repulsion, the basis of repulsion is fear, I would guess,
Yeah.
because you feel that way because you don't understand it or you can't. But that's not the entire story either. It's also something.
Or we feel threatened that there are people. We don't like to think that there are people that hold that worldview, because their worldview is going to threaten the world that we want to see.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. The
It's
problem
interesting.
is that
Yes.
when the fear or the disagreement with that worldview rises to the level of that you simply cannot tolerate it,
Yeah.
that you're never going to indict him. No, that's part of the problem, that as the polarity increases between two camps of any given subject, whether it's Brexit or what's going on in the States or how to deal with immigrants or whatever, as the polarity, and it seems like we've entered a period where there is a great deal of polarity in a great many things. There's very little
Yeah.
consensus. That how do you decrease that level of a disparate opinion? It's very hard to do when it
It
becomes
is
so
difficult.
polarized. There's
I can't remember where it was now, but a while ago I read something about, for the first time, real disgust seemed to have entered the political arena. That one side would feel utter disgust for the opposing views and the proponents of those views,
I
and
think
that disgust, it's, whether it's within a marriage or whether it's within a political divide, it's really very difficult to come back from there.
it's poisonous, and I think that's what I meant. I also mean by repulsion. They're
Yeah.
disgusted by the opinions of others and can't abide it. They're repulsed by it. That's Yeah, I think that's
Mm,
in part my reaction to a lot. I try and incorporate all different views, and I try and listen to all different sides, but sometimes I just can't. I,
yeah.
it's just
Yes.
too difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. It's, um, in a way, that's not a courage issue. What is it, and what are the consequences of not being able to, like, be in the room with those views? Where do we go from there?
I
I
don't
suppose
know that
all
you
we
have
can
to.
do is try and bring, like, the opposing parties back into more neutral territory where we can start building some consensus and leave those more extreme views, um, on the shelf for the moment.
Outside the door. I don't know. That's yeah, that I'm aware of that. And you would think that I'm fairly well gauged, pretty well put together to appreciate a lot of different views. I came from a very different place from where I live now. I engage with very different people every day.
Mm,
I'm around all different kinds of folks all the time. Um, and I still can't rise above some of that. You know,
yeah.
yeah. So it's difficult. It is a. Oh, it's I. There may be an element of fatigue, also. I think for everyone. I think everyone is tired and worn out of the stress that's involved in having to listen to that.
Mm,
I think
mm,
that that's in a way where people are now. I see this and I sense this in a lot of different things I read, and even in my simple social contacts, that people are just tired to death of the strife and the stress and the constant hammering from one side or the other. I think people are worn out. And when you get tired, as you know more than anyone, your ability to have courage in the face of those other truths becomes much less strong.
absolutely. Yeah, I
Your
mean, going
courage
back
is weakened or diminished by your degree of fatigue. So I think that given the nature that how fatigued people are and overwhelmed they are by the news and the huge amount of data that we're exposed to, their ability to incorporate those views is really not there.
I think that goes back to that chart that I had last week, where, like the quadrants, where courage was in the quadrant where you have proactive decisions and high moral energy. You do need energy to be courageous. It takes proactive effort to be courageous, and if you're exhausted with it all, as you say, you just don't have that energy. And maybe it's partly. I mean, I fully applaud the certainly the more neutral sectors of the media, but I think at the moment it's so easy to overdose on media, and it does come with its own exhaustion, especially because the way that media operates, we're exposed to it, but we're not engaged in it, so it can just become really overwhelming in terms of depressing information without giving us any agency to really do something about it. So maybe we need to kind of have a bit of a media detox if we're going to have the energy to have those courageous conversations with people of views that may differ wildly from our own.
It's a little like we've been watching the most exciting football or cricket or basketball game imaginable for the last 18 months. And it's been the fourth quarter and the final 5 minutes of the game for the last 18 months. And it just doesn't stop, and no one can sustain. And I feel like a spectator more than a participant. But even spectating in that it just wears you out after a while. It becomes absolute total noise, and is no longer. Well, it hasn't reached the point where it's not engaging. You have to admit that. All the titillating facts that come out through the media, whichever side you're looking at, it's gossip. It's stuff that people thrive on, and I find myself looking at those things. I try and turn the news off sometimes for 24 hours at a time, and I'm fairly successful at that.
My regime at the moment is I'm signed up to get the headlines each day from The Guardian as an email. So rather than going to the website where I could get sidetracked by all kinds of clickbait,
right.
I skim the headlines and I try and resist the urge to click on the ones that just sound like opinion. And just click through on the ones that I think, oh yeah, I think I probably really ought to know something about that. So it depends day to day, but like the maximum number of news stories I would read in one day will probably be 7 or 8. And if I'm like really busy, then I might not catch up on the news for a day or so. But I just really felt that immediately after Brexit and after the US election, I was binging in a very unhealthy way. Binging is never healthy, although binging on box sets can be kind of fun at the time. But, certainly this media binging was making me feel quite depressed, but also I felt like I was letting myself down a bit. I felt like I was, like I had this almost morbid fascination or this prurient fascination with what was going on that was starting to feel a bit like how I feel after reading a celebrity mag in the hairdressers. It's just like, this is not good for me.
Kind of dirty.
Yes. Yeah.
I have found out something wonderful about, I don't love Facebook. I enjoy seeing things that other people post, friends from way back when. It is interesting to see people I haven't talked to in 40 years. But it can be an absolute time sink if you are.
Yes.
Do you know what? If you look at the app on your tablet, on your iPad or a tablet, Android tablet, there's a section, because the most important thing on Facebook is to make sure you wish everyone happy birthday.
Of course.
And at least on the iPad, there's a little tab over on the right-hand side that says, today is blah, blah, blah's birthday, and it lists them all in a list. And you go, okay, and you can click on, and then their name, their little faces pop up. So there are 4 little faces there if it's 4 people who have birthdays. You click on the face and go, and my machine, if I start to type H-A, it goes happy, and then it suggests birthday. I go, H-A, birthday, Exclamation point next. So I can do all 4 birthdays in about 30 seconds, and then my Facebook duty is done for the day.
It does that on the laptop. Like if I go to Facebook from my laptop,
Oh,
then it
really?
has the same thing. Yeah,
Oh, well,
because
I didn't know that.
I try and minimize my Facebook
Oh, yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
I don't find it too addictive, but I don't
I
know.
don't, I
Maybe
don't
I'm
either, but
just,
I do like to see folks that I haven't seen for a very long time and wonder what happened to them. So, yeah.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I end up unfollowing a whole. I keep them friended; they're still my friends, but I can't listen to what they say, so I just unfollow them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
oh well. Anyway, that's
So
so we haven't. Was it?
I'm feeling like it's about time for our conspiracy
Oh
theory of
my.
Phil.
Okay, let me get another screen up here over here on the other side because
What do you have for us,
I have a
producer?
good one today. I have to put my glasses on for this. I said earlier I was not vain. It was just the reflection of my glasses on the screen, but perhaps I'm still vain too.
Well, you still look lovely, even with your
Oh,
glasses on,
thank
Vic.
you.
Very intellectual.
Yeah, so, well, we'll see. You know that American billionaires are buying up New Zealand. You knew that.
I don't know if I did know that.
They are. They are in vast numbers are buying. I think they bought 44,000 square miles of New Zealand last year.
How many square miles are there in New Zealand?
Well, there are at least 44,000. I don't know, but that was the number I read. That wealthy Americans are flocking to New Zealand to buy
Now, why
property.
is that? Are they
Why would
afraid
they?
of war?
Yes, you know it's you know what preppers are, yeah,
Yes.
people who are preparing for the apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's not just New Zealand; they also are buying property in Chile.
Mm,
For two reasons: fairly good infrastructure, particularly in New Zealand, because it has first world infrastructure, and it's a
yes,
very long way away from anywhere else.
it is. And it's beautiful.
It is. I haven't been there, but I have heard that it is absolutely fantastic. Yeah. So,
So, Southern
and,
Hemisphere
and
seems to be quite in vogue at
yeah,
the moment.
and it's not a nuclear target. Should there be
Yeah.
as the unthinkable? Okay. In fact, even to the extent that some of these people are having eye surgery done, because think about it. Simple things like getting a hold of a pair of glasses. If there's a total breakdown in
Well,
society, getting a pair of glasses might become a difficult thing to do.
you know what? When I had my environmental awakening 13, 14 years ago, I was very much that mindset. I mean, that's why I have my G-Shock watch that is solar powered. It will,
Oh,
although, I suppose if the atomic clock in Germany goes down, then it might not be all that accurate. But at least it will keep running, and I think it'll be tolerably accurate for the remainder of my lifetime anyway.
yeah.
So even
Well,
when it all goes to hell, at least I'll know the time.
right. Well, I need my glasses to be able to see up to about this far away. I don't need them to drive or to fell a gazelle, or I could shoot one. I just couldn't butcher it. Anyway, so I'll survive. There's another reason that they're in New Zealand, and I'll bet you didn't know this. First, I have to backtrack just a little. You know, Canberra is the capital of Australia.
Yes.
This is going to take a little detour, but I promise to get back to the billionaires in New Zealand here in a bit. In Canberra, did you know that Canberra was designed by Freemasons, in particular an American Freemason, in 1913?
I did not know
You
that.
did not know that. That it lies. Canberra is designed along ley lines. Do you know what ley lines are?
I do,
You
as
do.
it
You've heard of this,
happens. Well,
yes.
there are lots of them in Britain, apparently. And also, when I went to Peru to look for Inca ruins,
Yeah.
we had an expert in sacred geometry on our expedition because the Incas also built according to ley lines
So you're
and.
familiar with the term geomancy, as in,
No.
well, it's the science, or it's the this the geomancy. It's divination using geology and geography. to
Hmm.
divine dowsing. You know what dowsing is, where you take
Yes,
this.
with
Now,
the
I've
fork
seen a guy
stick. Yeah.
douse, and I have to admit, I am an absolute believer in dowsing. There used to be an old guy in Franklin, Nebraska that could take, had to be a peach tree. You take the branch of a peach tree that was in a Y, and
Yeah.
he could find where to drill a well, and I saw it happen.
Wow.
Anyway, that's geomancy.
Okay.
And part of geomancy are the idea of ley lines, and the books that were written in the beginning of the 20th century. There were two Brits that did all the initial studies and of where the ley lines were. Anyway, did you know that Canberra lies on ley lines that go all the way to the Harp Array in Alaska? To the Harp, the high
I did
altitude?
not.
Yes, they do.
That is
There's a
definitely in the realm
connection.
of what I didn't know. I didn't know.
All right, so designed by Freemasons and very strongly influenced by geomancy is Canberra, Australia. All right, now well, there's one more step to this, okay? Have you heard of the Snowy Mountain scheme in Australia? Beginning in
No.
49, they built hydroelectric dams all through the Snowy Mountains in southeastern Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, as part of that scheme, of that construction, they built 225 kilometers of tunnels. And here
Mm.
comes the good part. Those tunnels are built to underground cities and and underground cities and underground installations that were designed to protect the government in the case of apocalyptic conditions.
In Australia. So
So
even when you
that's
go down under, there's another city
it.
down under the
Yeah,
down
and
under.
one of them is quite close to Canberra. Okay, one
Hmm.
of the very biggest ones. All right, so we got all that together. What does that have to do with New Zealand? Now, who's one of the American billionaires that's well, he hasn't bought us in New Zealand, but when we think of American billionaires with crazy ideas, who do we think of? Perhaps right at the top of the list, who has a car company and his own space
Elon
company,
Musk,
Elon Musk. What is he building in addition to all those things? The
an underground
hyper
city,
the hyperloop.
the Hyperloop.
The hyperloop, the high
Can you
speed
just
underground train.
remind?
They will
Oh, right.
travel through evacuated tunnels under the, and they'll go,
Oh,
is it 3 times the speed of, so like 3,000 miles an hour or some crazy thing.
yeah, these vacuum tubes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the billionaires in New Zealand are buying those properties because they're connected. This is a conspiracy theory. They're connected by hyperloop to the underground cities in the Snowy Mountain scheme in southeastern Australia.
But of course, I don't know how I
It makes
didn't know
perfect
that.
sense. That's the problem with all of these conspiracies is you start with one thing that is truly happening.
Yes,
There is Americans bought 44 million square miles or whatever it was of New Zealand last year.
44,000, I think.
44,000. And then why are they there? Well, if one follows on to another, and there really is a connective theory that throws all this together, because those people are all part of the Illuminati. And who built Canberra, Australia? The Illuminati, because it's full of those
Full of
Freemason
Masons,
sigs.
yeah.
So just,
Well, obviously that makes perfect
it
sense.
does, doesn't it? It's
But
perfectly.
that, as you say, that's the weird thing about these conspiracy theories is that they're sort of frighteningly plausible because they're not, completely wackadoodle out there. They have enough foundation in reality that you go, well, I could sort of see that being possibly true-ish.
I'm not sure about the underground cities part, but
That seems, well,
I mean, I guess maybe we'd like to, all of us would like to think that somewhere there is an organizing force that had the ability to build underground cities too.
I suppose since time immemorial, human beings have resorted to underground cities in times of danger, like in, can't remember the name of the place in Turkey now, but there is a complex of tunnels and chambers
Oh, I don't know about that.
that a persecuted people retreated to
Uh,
escape from their persecution. So, it's somewhere in Cappadocia. I can't remember the exact name of the place now, but yeah. Well,
Well, next week I'll
why
have to
not?
tell you this little teaser for next week. There's a great book out now called Creating Christ, and I will tell you the theory about that next week. And it has something to do with ancient civilizations and a retreat from disaster.
Oh, nice teaser for next week's
Oh,
podcast.
oh yeah, yeah. Actually, it's quite an interesting book, but it as I began to read, I began to realize these are a lot of theories all tied together, just as I have just described this one.
I love it. I love it. Now I'm trying to remember the Yorick quote about stranger things twixt heaven and earth, but
Earth,
I can't remember it right now.
stranger than
Anyway,
you can imagine. Yes, yes, I've forgotten that.
yes.
Yeah. All right, Roz.
And there again, some of them are just pure fabrication. Wonderful. Thank you, Vic. And thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in. We will see you again next week when it's actually my midterm. No, it's not midterm break. That's the week after. Yeah, we're in week 8 next week, and then we go into the midterm spring break.
Wow, that's late, I guess, this year. But maybe that's just, is it? Okay.
Yep. The midterm is not at midterm. We have 8 weeks in the first half and 5 weeks in the second half. So the halves
Uh,
are not very
it's not,
half-like.
it's not, oh, I guess if you had to delay, you'd want to delay until March. So when you got to Daytona Beach, there would actually be warmth and sun. On your spring break, everybody goes to Daytona Beach, or they did.
Ah, okay. Well, now I know.
What will you do for the week of spring break?
Well, it's 2 weeks and I'm coming back to England again.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yes. We have a little trip up to Edinburgh planned,
Oh my, that's nice. Okay.
where there probably are lots of underground tunnels. It's that kind of a place.
I've taken the haunted tour of Edinburgh years ago,
Oh, that sounds good.
which ended up
We might
actually
have
just
to do that.
walking through a lot of very dusty storerooms underneath those old bridges. That's all it really was.
Yes, okay, that sounds a little underwhelming. Any tour that involves pubs, I think, would be high on our list.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
folks,
All right.
have a courageous week, and we shall see you next week, same time, same place. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.